What is up, everyone? How's it going? This is Bitcoin Magazine Live. This is November 28th, 2022, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nolan. How goes it, Nolan?
I love life, Chris. How was your Thanksgiving weekend? Mine was great.
I had a great one. I had my family down at my house, so it was my first time hosting Thanksgiving, so I guess that's really becoming an adult and doing all that. But it's great to talk to you, man.
Well, we're happy to be here, and we're going to be talking about first all the psyops. Did anyone see that great Elon Musk tweet today? Honestly, I don't care about this particular psyop. Now we're finally talking about psyops in the public. Isn't that great? The first psyop that I don't really care about, but we've got to bring up just because it's in the news, is the whole SBF thing. Right? What's going on with SBF? Where's SBF? Where's SBF? Well, maybe SBF will be in New York City in 2 days. We're not sure. Maybe CNBC will be hosting him in 2 days to hear about all the new insights in the world of investing. You can invest in SBF, apparently. He's going to be making a speech. Really fun distraction to watch BitBoy down there doing his content. What do you think about that?
I think it's funny. I think he's doing. I mean, I have my gripes with BitBoy. If I think he should focus more only Bitcoin, but that's me personally. But I think has more journalistic integrity actually going down there and looking for him than a lot of the mainstream media outlets. So I don't know if that's to say that the mainstream media outlets have such a fall from grace that I value BitBoy's opinion or journalistic integrity for whatever that's worth more than theirs. But yeah, it's entertaining at least.
Well, we see the contrast between mainstream media and the media that's happening on the collective brain that is Twitter, led by Bitcoin. Twitter, of course, is top of the heap in news and information. That's why we invite you to our show all the time in Miami. That's going to be the big culmination of all of this great news getting, where we really see the contrast between mainstream media and what we do here. We talk about all the things that are really important to Bitcoiners because we're writing the future here, right? Writing the future is really important because we made a lot of mistakes in the past, haven't we, Chris? China is starting to show us all the terrible things that happen with centralization. So what's going on there, Chris? What's going on?
Yeah, so Apple's kind of bending the knee to China. This is kind of not really a surprise. I was talking to Nolan. We were talking before the show, and remember they had the video. I think it was like 1985 or 1984. Apple made like a video saying like, stopping tyranny. And there's a guy that runs into this amphitheater, and there's tons of people in all the seats, and he throws a sword, at this TV that was like spewing propaganda. Well, it seems, the great Batman quote: either you die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. Maybe in contrast to Steve Jobs passing away and ultimately watching his creation become kind of more of a monster or more villainous. But basically what Apple did is they forced an update among the iPhone products or Apple products in China. And basically what people were doing, Chinese people or Chinese protesters, were using the airdrop feature, which is a way of being more anonymous and dropping files or information to other Apple users about, just a lot of the dangers of, I'm assuming COVID or a lot of the protests that were going on. And ultimately, the airdrop feature was limited to only for a 10-minute radius to a much smaller radius versus airdropping it to a much larger contingent of people. So it's very sad to see that Apple just kind of bends the knee at the whim of China. I know they're doing it for monetary incentives. I'm sure Xi, gets on the phone call with Tim Pool, not Tim Pool,
Tim Apple. Tim Apple.
Tim Cook. There we go. Tim Cook, in order, and probably the board, in order to force this to go through. Otherwise, they'll pull production and or stop supporting it in mainland China. But very sad to see. What are your thoughts on this, Nolan?
Yeah, amazing. And we can see the PSYOP telegraphed, right? We saw the play on advertisers on Twitter. There was a big push to stop people from advertising on Twitter. It looks like the Operation Choke Point is going to move to the App Store to get Twitter off. And it led to Elon Musk actually threatening to make his own cell phone this weekend to compete against Apple and the App Store and this potential choke point, which we've seen work before, right? We've seen these third-party security holes be susceptible to targeting from all of these psyops and all of these forces. So bad news, and we continue to hope that things don't get as bloody as they might in China, but it looks like are kind of off right now. And the Bitcoin angle there to me remains, remember how this all started in China? This all started with the Hong Kong situation. It went from Hong Kong. And what was the Hong Kong situation? And by the Hong Kong situation, I mean 2019, the Hong Kong protests, Hong Kong's laws changing so that there was extradition to mainland China. And this extradition to mainland China was actually all of it predicated all of it based on FATF and FinCEN and FinTrack and all those things that are already pushing up against Bitcoiners, all these things that would have our wallets monitored and wallet transactions monitored. Remember that it was China's turn at the head of FATF that pushed for the rule change to allow extradition from Hong Kong to mainland China. It was for money laundering. The money laundering they never even catch, right? They said this had to happen. And now we saw a protest in Hong Kong. But now what we see is that protest has spread throughout the country. And that's what's different in China this time with the protests. It's not in one area, it's everywhere. And as I said on the breakup this morning on my show, you know, it's a bit like the end of the third Matrix movie. You know how the whole Matrix story ends when Neo allows the code to get absorbed back in and it sort of restarts the whole thing. My theory is China would get Hong Kong, but they would choke on the bone. And it looks like they're choking on the bone now. No thanks to Apple. No thanks to Apple. So Apple, get out of here. Those are the bad country stories. Right? Those are the bad country stories and the bad companies. But we have good country stories. We've got El Salvador, right? What has El Salvador done? They finally submitted the bill to create the Volcano bond. And this is the long foretold synergy, the energy industry, the coordination of energy finance, of public infrastructure, and of Bitcoin. So here we are, guys. This is the dawn of grand monetary policy with Bitcoin baked inside to incentivize proper behavior. And in this case, the deployment of physical infrastructure and the development of natural resources. Amazing story. Amazing story.
Yeah, I think it's very fascinating. I know it took a little bit longer to get their, foot on the ground in terms of volcano bonds. Obviously, the delay. A lot of people said it was because of fundraising issue, which may be the case as the global economy. It has been getting worse since last November as interest rates in the US have been hiked. But that's what we do in Bitcoin. We're trying to get away from one single man or woman determining the interest rates for not only just the US, but the world. We know Bitcoin's monetary policy. About every 10 minutes, a new block comes in. And that's a world that I prefer. But, you know, there's always contrast. So while El Salvador is great, China, things are bad, but maybe getting better. Hochul, the governor out of New York, takes a turn for the worse. So they're kind of banning themselves from a proof of work protocol. I'll caveat that with no company using proof of work cryptocurrency mining. They're encompassing Bitcoin and all other cryptocurrencies. They cannot use a proof of work mining algorithm for their computers if it does not use 100% renewable energies. This is in contrast. There's a couple behind the wire plants that were getting start up again. So they were coal-fired power plants. A lot of people said they had a lot of noise. I don't necessarily consider them good actors in the space, but there was a lot of noise. They were kind of restoring behind the wire this old coal-fired power plant. And because of, one incident, they're trying to regulate the whole industry for better or worse. I'd love your insight into this, Nolan. There's the contrast of good and bad.
Yeah, there is. So we're seeing, you can do things like El Salvador and you can actively promote Bitcoin, but you can do things like New York and by accident promote Bitcoin. Because what could happen there is we could see the incentivization of small modular nuclear reactors and Bitcoiners actually developing those things to get around these rules in order to use New York State's abundant natural resources and perfect climate, cool right now in the winter, in order to mine Bitcoin. So I saw again this weekend, Rolls-Royce putting a lot of noise about its small modular nuclear reactors. I continue to believe Bitcoiners will be behind purchasing one or two of these within the next few years. We'll see. But maybe New York now opened itself up. The more they try to ban it, the more problems they're going to have. And we can even see that because if New York doesn't get its act together, its good buddy down south, Texas, looks like it is. And in the same world, this stuff's coming at you fast now. It looks like we have a Bitcoin states of America. We've got El Salvador, clearly a Bitcoin state in America, and now Texas coming out with what we can call a working paper, but a few suggestions, and I'll read some of them to you. They're amazing, right? So a working group out of Texas came out with this document, and it's got all kinds of amazing suggestions. Here are the best ones, that the government HODLs Bitcoin. They say Bitcoin or other coins with a large market cap or whatever. So right now we've got Max Kaiser on Twitter and Stacy on Twitter, who are definitely out there playfully promoting El Salvador as the top Bitcoin state in America, but also saying they're not doing so bad in Texas if they would get rid of a bit of this. And that is just that they mentioned it wasn't only Bitcoin in a few ways, but Bitcoin was written in the paper and they'll continue to say what they said. So it's government hodling Bitcoin, self-custody protections, tax breaks for Bitcoin mining. So they didn't even care about what source the energy is from. If you're going to Bitcoin mine, there's going to be tax incentives for you, and even more tax incentives for those folks who are allowing Texas to increase the load of the grid in order to sell back to or even give back to the grid in times of need, such as we saw in the ice storm last winter when Bitcoin miners allowed the overall capacity of the network to be greater. Therefore, we're able to patch holes when holes erupted during ice storms. Similar thing happened this summer when I was there, and temperatures were 104 degrees in the middle of the day in June before humidity was even accounted for. And they never had a single brownout. They were drawing all kinds of energy. And the reason they were able to do that was because the Bitcoin miners were already there running the system hotter so that any excess need could just be given over. And it was an amazing thing to be there when the Bitcoin miners actually announced publicly this summer that they were going to coordinate to do so and help Texas through the heat spell that I was there for. So amazing stuff. And it looks like Texas is going to force New York to figure it out one way or the other, because if Texas continues to do stuff like this, you are going to see things like nuclear reactors, things like super sophisticated $100 million, billion-dollar finance jobs with Bitcoin at the heart. And if that's the case, then New York is going to be in big, big trouble. And if you're not a Bitcoin state of America by then, you're going to be in trouble too.
Yeah, and even to counterpoint that as well, I know that New York, they have pretty strict rules for exchanges. I know there's only a certain number of bit licenses, and this is a big point of contention. I know like apps like Strike and Cash App can't be used there. I believe there's maybe one or two exchanges that can operate out of there. But yeah, Nolan, it's very, very interesting. And they seem to be, like you said, you don't ban Bitcoin, you just ban yourself from, or you yourself and your constituents from the use of Bitcoin. What are your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually around and met with Ben Losky. He was the originator of the Bit license, which is this particular New York legal system that they use there, which created all these things. And there were a lot more exchanges there, but there was a bunch of refugees immediately. So BitMEX and Arthur Hayes ran away from New York the minute the Bit license came. Kraken ran away from New York the minute the Bit license came. Shapeshift ran away from New York the moment the Bit license came. Several entrepreneurs who were based in New York City all split because the Bit license was there, because it was just one of these regulatory moat things. If you paid the $1 million required to get the Bit license, you could get it. And when I went to meet with Losky when he was in Albany, I was working with the Canadian Senate Banking Committee, and we told him then even that he had miscalculated, that his situation where he thought just because it's New York State, they would have all this sway and capacity and people would have to get the license anyway. We said, maybe not. Like, if you're really paying attention to this stuff, it doesn't really look like that. They'll just go elsewhere. They went elsewhere. They went elsewhere.
Yeah, and even so, he was working obviously for the government or at least the regulatory bodies, and then didn't he leave to go work on the board of one of the companies? And
Immediately.
now he
He
gets
went to
to,
Ripple immediately.
yeah, exactly. Now he gets to work on the board and say, oh, here's ways to get around the regulations or loopholes in the law that he helped write.
Yeah.
So, I guess show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome kind of deal.
Yeah, he's hidden and has never engaged publicly about the trail of rules he left behind. And so everyone's left to just try to adhere to them. And New York just figured out a bunch of workarounds, and, it's happening anyway.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are fighting back from tyranny or, the lack of stupid regulation or regulation in general. So there was a demonstration in the Netherlands, again, outside the House of Representatives against the digital euro CBDC or central bank digital currency. Even in the rain, there was a bunch of people showing up. I think it's funny when things like this occur, not funny in the context of people protesting, but funny in the context of governments not using all the data points. And what I mean by this is Nigeria had 0.5% adoption. This isn't 50% adoption. This is 0.5%. So not even a full 1 percentage point of people adopting central bank digital currencies in their country of Nigeria, even with incentives of you get extra money, or they were trying to give it away for people to use. While they were obviously at the same time banning Bitcoin, and then Nigeria saw their peer-to-peer exchange rates just skyrocket or rocket up in usage. So there was more and more people using peer-to-peer transactions of Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin on more of I guess you call it a black market or just in a peer-to-peer fashion, to the point that the government had to backtrack what they said because they realized they were missing out of the potential tax income. So, they're trying to incentivize people okay, you can use Bitcoin, but you just got to pay tax on those things. And that remains to be seen. But it's very interesting, the contrast that Bitcoin adoption goes parabolic when the adoption of central bank digital currencies in the country of Nigeria couldn't even get 1 whole percentage point. Nolan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we hope we continue to see that, right? Because the whole game here is that we're against the dopamine dealers because they're going to keep layering on the incentives that are going to be all about instant gratification and instant access or access at all. And you know, it's going to be tied to all kinds of just like look what we saw in China with the protests immediately. What happened immediately? The CBDCs kicked in, flashed red, and told you to go home. And the protesters, I mean, I'm not sure it's every one of them, but I don't think they get to just buy a coffee or whatever and go protest. It's not like protests in the West. Not that we're great, you know. Definitely not trying to say we don't game our protests too. Certainly, lots of cash injections going on in our system to make sure they're nice and greased and full of energy. But what's going on over there is they can't actually use cash, right? They can't actually use it in any way in order to protest because it gets shut down immediately. So, if the people of the world were considering these CBDCs, their attractiveness, the incentives they have, this looks pretty scary. So hopefully people keep that top of mind, and fear becomes greater than fear of what could be, and the prison you're putting yourself in is greater than the appetite for some, you know, sweets or something.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So there's been a lot of threads released recently, or a lot of talk, obviously, about Bitcoin when its initial inception as a concept, a digital peer-to-peer electronic cash system. But a lot of people we've seen in this year, in particular, even maybe even the tail end of last year, the energy usage. Obviously, we've talked about Texas. We've now had Shell sponsoring Bitcoin 2023 in Miami. Come check it out, the energy debate. But a lot of people saying the second revolution of Bitcoin, not just being a peer-to-peer digital cash system, is the energy revolution that's occurring. And Nolan, I always look to you and your advice. You have a lot of brilliant insights on Twitter, on Count BTC, about the energy revolution that Bitcoin's ensuing. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So the minute you're referring to a tweet from SAS Mining, and I was one of the first people to come and look at it, the second revolution. And the way I see it, and we can even see it now because people are starting to talk about how Bitcoin gets out of this FTX thing, and how does the crypto crash relate to Bitcoin? Well, in a number of ways, we won't go through all of those connections, but the main one we see now is that all these other coins don't even have another industry that they're involved in to this extent, right? It's just a Wall Street thing, it's just speculation. My frame was always when I saw human capital, people moving into the industry, you could sort of predict that it was going to influence that industry. And the first one you saw, was cryptography, there was politics. Those were the earliest Bitcoin people, right? The people that knew about cryptography, knew about the project to create money liberated from the state. And then the political folks who wanted that anyway because they came at that not from a technical point of view, but from a political point of view. Then what we got next were the Wall Street folks who were not sentimental. They said people trade it. And you could just imagine that all kinds of people would pour into Bitcoin and then crypto because it was their industry, it was in their language. What I saw after and predicted the minute I saw it was the energy sector moving along and coming. And when you see the energy sector move along and coming, you realize that Bitcoin is going to do what it did to Wall Street to the energy industry. It's going to rewire how things are financed, rewire how things are traded, how they're organized and arranged. And that's what this thread gets into. And is exactly why we're having a lot of focus on energy distribution, energy literacy in the end, right? Because what happened in Europe right now, what's happening in Europe with their skyrocketing energy prices, where real vulnerability to American supply, Russian supply, how policy levers have been taken out of their hands, it really is all the result of a lack of energy literacy. The same reason why energy or why finance and fiat money was able to grow from a lack of financial literacy, right? People were financially illiterate. I've said it many times. I was a lawyer and central bank researcher along with in the Senate Banking Committee in Canada, but looking at central bank research stuff. And I was financially illiterate before I heard about Bitcoin. And I had been through all the schooling, I had done everything you could possibly do. And I was a financial illiterate until I learned about Bitcoin and was able to teach myself using all the resources and with the community to help understand what money really was and how you should manage it and how you should grow it and all those things. Well, the same thing can be said about energy literacy. People think it's all about, oh, I'll just make it like this and it will be fine. I'll just get it from the sun or I'll get it from the wind. That it's never that simple. And there's trade-offs, there's all kinds of considerations, and the literacy level around energy is very low. So what SAS mining is saying, forget just for a second about Bitcoin's ability to finance this and be at the source of the incentives to grow infrastructure. If we just stop and think about it from the point of view of literacy, it's going to show all about how we build resilient grids, how we build systems that will keep us energized, keep the energy flowing, and keep the energy cheap. And that's what Bitcoin's going to start unveiling. It's an energy literacy bonanza coming our way, powered by Bitcoin literates. So that's what I see.
I think that's great insights. Yeah, and talking about another project, so shifting over to Ethereum, I say it's kind of built on sand. A lot of Bitcoiners were shouting from the mountaintops, saying that when they did the merge or they went from proof of work to proof of stake, that was going to basically co-opt and centralize their network. And a lot of the developers or community was saying, no, that's not the case. That's not going to happen. We saw just in a few short weeks, basically more than 50% of the blocks are OFAC compliant, meaning that if you're using it in a restricted designation, whether it's Iran, whether it is Russian citizens, whatever country you're from that is currently on the OFAC compliance list or the OFAC list, your transactions are being censored, or at least 50% of the blocks. I think in time that will work to be 100%, because with staking, the more you have control over the network. And they're more incentivized to continue to keep staking and grow larger and larger portions of the network. Well, we've also seen now that they have a new development or update coming out that in order to develop on the back end of Ethereum, it requires your IP address. So we've seen attacks from the Tornado Cash developer who created a way to de-anonymize your Bitcoin. He's currently sitting in jail. He's been there for over 3 months now. But now it's like, why would any developer want to risk developing on this when you have your IP address, which is very closely tied to exactly your location? Obviously, I guess there's ways that you could try and use Tor, but they're saying that they're requiring an exact IP address, not like an encrypted one. So I think this is very bad for them. Many of the Bitcoiners have said, like, this is why you should go Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. I know Ethereum is second in market cap by comparison, but I think that this is just going to be a co-opted chain. And many Bitcoiners have predicted that this will be the thing that ushers in the central bank digital currencies, because governments can control it. There's I guess I don't want to say a single point of failure, but in Vitalik and Joe Lubin, and obviously it has backing of JP Morgan. So they'd like their piece of the pie. If there was a central bank digital currency, that they don't get wiped out or removed from issuing it. They would like to do it in conjunction with the Federal Reserve. Anything else you want to add there, Nolan?
Well, I'll give the Elon Musk point of view. Honestly, I don't care about the PSYOP. But what I will say is the following, and this is sort of just to be slightly contrarian. I've always been, as a Bitcoiner, a big promoter of Ethereum, because we want to drive them into all the trouble first. That's the whole point of having the whole point of building with adversarial-minded networks, which is what you're doing in cryptography. One of the things that people confuse, let's say, is that when they think of technology, they think of technology as perhaps consumer technology. So if it's better, the newer version, faster, stronger, iPhone 11, iPhone 12, iPhone 13, Super Nintendo, you get it, right? But Bitcoin, even though it's technology, actually belongs to a totally different principle. However long it's lasted, it's why it's valuable, which is why it's not a fail fast and break things, which is why it's a slow and steady, preserve the sanctity of the system, don't push it too fast, because we don't know what isn't broken, right? And we need to be able to experiment in new ways. So Ethereum was always great to experiment with, because you needed a place where you could go and do things and they didn't have a consequence and you could learn and all that. Well, then Ethereum went ahead and became really valuable. So now there are real world consequences. But seeing those real world consequences play out in another network, watching the attack vector of the state and how it could, with unintended, the people didn't mean for this to happen. They saw it happen before their eyes. So I think the whole thing will give reason to Bitcoiners' original reluctance, right back to the original soft fork, the original big block debates, that we're in this to go slow and steady, and that the preservation of the system is the most important thing.
Definitely.
But good on them to go figure out what's wrong. Thank you. More Ethereum, more. Go, take the bullets.
Sometimes you got to touch the stove to get burned in order to learn. And then also, I think, to your point, having more different things, it obfuscates the government's focus on what they should focus on when there's a lot of different things going on. Well,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of government, and there's a big announcement. So Yay had a big announcement. Nolan, you want to talk about it?
Ye is running for president, but we've got to be weary of the psyop action. You know what I mean? What we see from what happened is he took out Trump in one shot. I think he killed Trump. I think the announcement totally demolished Trump. The whole trap where he brought two other folks and Trump fell for it. I don't think there's any, Trump can explain it to his base, but right away we see the stories coming. It's Charlottesville, it's this and that. So I think in one move, Kanye has completely relegated Trump to last election and 2 elections ago news. So that in one move was very astounding. But we've got to ask how these people have come together in the first place. Now, I still think that there is something that we need to pay attention to here, but we've got to be very careful about how parties that are so sophisticated in messaging that understand how the actual sausage is made are able to operate in this way, and we just got to know who's behind it. If it's Ye on his own, amazing work as far as attacking your opponent and framing the issue. Deadly, 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 deadly. Did he do it? We'll see. Once again, I have a Ye policy. I have created a Ye for president policy plan. It would involve an event, right, on Jekyll Island, where the US dollar was created by the original bank cartel in 1912. And it's all kinds of occult stories on that island, by the way. So we'll go there and have like a exorcism and do a big show, right? It'll be other than our show in Miami, Bitcoin 2023, May 17th to 20th. It'll be the other biggest show. And I think Bitcoin Magazine is going to produce this presidential election 2024 show. I'm just putting it out in the universe, but it's going to happen. And Ye is going to be the headline. But I've got other points of the policy that would help him. But, I think he can keep straddling the line here, but the whole thing is very, very injected with spin, let's say. Lots of curveballers involved in this one. So wait and see, fog of war.
Yeah, speaking of curveballs, there's one last final one. Maybe not as much as a surprise to everyone else, but Blockfi looks like they are finally filing bankruptcy. They're filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they're conducting major layoffs. This comes at a time when they file for bankruptcy. They have to reveal their balance sheet. It appears that they only have about $256 million in cash or their cash equivalents. And the balance sheet was a little confusing, but they have anywhere between 1 billion to 10 billion in liabilities. So having only 256 million to that orders of magnitude. I mean, even a billion, that's 4 times the amount of cash they have on hand. If it's 10 billion with the off balance sheet, liabilities or, getting liquidated by FTX and Celsius and such is not a good thing. I hope the people that had their money in there, it was only a minimal amount, but I know that there were stories of people with large sums of money, potentially even all of their family's money tied up in that. I hope you're able to withdraw in time, and my thoughts go out to the victims, obviously caught up in all of this. Nolan, anything else you want to add before you close out here?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you watch shows like this, to save you from Blockfi type stuff. And that's why at our event this year, we're going to be having a real focus on self-custody, financial literacy, personal risk management. We're even asking people that involve themselves in these kinds of services to start thinking about how they're going to promote self-custody amongst their clients, and how we can let the full suite of tools that are not really put before anyone to come out and be put before our audience, because we want to arm our audience as much as possible with the only useful information out there: self-custody. That's it. That's the name of the game, guys. Right?
Definitely. So definitely not your keys, not your coins. Make sure you self-custody them in your own hardware device, or if you don't have an option with all these exchanges blowing up, even I say a hot wallet is better than being on an exchange at the time being. With that being said, you can learn more about it at Bitcoin 2023, as Nolan had said earlier, from May 18th through the 20th. Looking forward to having, bearing it out in this crypto winter, as well as talking to you guys about the energy focus of Bitcoin and the revolution that's providing. You can use code BMLive to get 10% off your conference tickets before prices go up. They will be going up in a few short weeks. But aside from that, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Peace.